Conversations from the Cave is a raw self-help podcast dedicated to discussing men's issues. From pornography to parenting, from religion to real life, from learning to loving. We discuss the real issues that affect real men every day. Join us each week for powerful, revealing Conversations from the Cave. Now your host, Kurt Kennedy.
Welcome to Conversations from the Cave. I'm your host, Kurt Kennedy. We have decided to go live as opposed to doing our regularly scheduled continuation as a result of the political happenings. If you are on the planet Earth, you are aware that in the last week and a half, there have been a lot of race relation issues that have come to the forefront as a result of Nazis and nationalists walking down the streets of Charlotte. And we spent some time in our before the break, we spent some time talking about the importance of not only having compassion and that love would sort of bridge the gap. We did talk a lot about the importance of understanding setting firm boundaries as a society of what we will accept and what we won't. We're back for part 2 and how to deal with the Nazis. I never thought in 2017 that we would even be having this discussion, given the fact that that was something dealt with back in World War II. But here we are, 2017. Nazis are not just over in Germany. They're on our soil. They are from our own people, and they are the cancer that does not seem to be going away. So we are going to take some time and talk about dealing with this in a perhaps more effective way. We're going to share our opinions, and then we're going to try to have some approach that allows us to come to grips with the fact that we've got some stuff going on here in America. We know that there are many of you who listen from around the world, so for those of you who do not know the story, it's pretty simple. We had a rally here in the United States, in one of our states, and in one of our states, neo-Nazis and nationalists and white nationalists were disparaging people of color, as well as anybody who was of Jewish national origin or of Jewish race origin, and anyone who they felt didn't fit their ideology, they disparaged. And in the process of that, there were some clashes. The experience escalated. They were met with a counter I don't want to say a counter-terrorist group, but a counter group that did not agree with their ideology. And the result was that one of the members of the first group, the Nazi/nationalist group, killed with a vehicle and injured several members of this counter-protesting organization. The result of that was that the president of the United States said that there were good people on both sides, which has confused, if not made many people question, the legitimacy of the sanity of that comment in the midst of the circumstances that have arisen. So with that being said, we are joined in the cave each week by a group of gentlemen who take the time to discuss these tough issues and perhaps give us some different perspectives or differing perspectives on how to address and deal with life. And this is now, in 2017, this is now life. So, gentlemen, Mustang to my right, can you check in and let us know that you're here?
Hey, this is Mustang back for another action-packed week of Conversations from the Cave.
And to my left, Nola, who's also with us.
Yes, this is NOLA 73. Meet you where you at.
Well, gentlemen, I am, as you know, this is a pretty hot topic, and I'm trying to remain somewhat unbiased, but I can't. I probably should let Mustang be the commentator.
you like, man, I got
probably on this one. I might have to.
Your crawl.
Yeah, this one is, I'm gonna just be real for a minute before we talk about the Nazis, and I think this is the place that I need to go for folks to understand the perspective that I'm taking as an approach here. Having lived in a state, and the state will remain nameless right now because I don't want to offend our listeners from across this great country, as well as the listeners that we have across the world. But there is a state that embraces open racism, and they have no problems with being racists. And what's interesting about it, I shared sometimes when we're off the air, we have little discussions, and I had shared an experience that I had when I first arrived at the school to get my doctorate. One of the professors met me after my first class, and I was smiling, and I was happy because I happened to been a big hockey fan, and so was the professor. So I thought, wow, this is great. Even on the test, there were some calculations which kind of used the backstory of hockey. So I met him afterwards and just said, man, this is great. This is a great class. And I remember him saying, I don't know how the hell you got in here, boy, but I'll be damn sure you're not going to get out. And that was how I got welcomed to my first year and first class of professional school on getting my doctorate. That professor, who again also will remain nameless because this is going around the world and I don't want to bash him, was a representation of what I had experienced for years, day in and day out, in America, the land of the free, the home of the brave. And what's interesting about that is that this professor unabashedly attacked day in and day out me in that seat. And I remember thinking that I really began to actually hate the hater. And it took me, this is some years ago, and it took me some years to actually not see everyone that way that was of a different hue or complexion. But I have to tell you how I got there. I got there by what Mustang said in our last, before the break, our last discussion, which is you really can't judge a person by the color of their skin. You have to judge them by the content of their character. And you have to be loving and compassionate to people who may not necessarily have your best interest at heart, to rise above that and to demonstrate who you are, because who they are is already demonstrated in what they do. Who you are is how you respond to it. And that moment of realization that I don't have to allow myself to be a racist, I don't have to lump all people who are white together, I don't have to lump all people who are black together, I don't have to lump all people who are any other hue in the grand rainbow diaspora of humanity and lump them together, because I don't think that is an accurate representation of the way that the world really is. I think that is an artificial construct that people have been taught day in, day out, in order to hate and to protect a particular interest, usually a self-interest. Now, I no longer have those biases and those feelings of sadness as a result of that individual. On the last day of my tenure at that institution, we both ended up with the exact same degree. And I remember walking, and he said, so I guess you made it through. And I simply called him by his first name and said, I certainly did. And I walked out without any hate, without any anger, without any decision to extract reprisals. But for that man, I allowed him to see that his decision to be oppressive in his approach would not deter me from the goal of being something more than just what he thought. And not just that, but I also demonstrated to him that his impression of all people of color was incorrect. And he later affirmed that. I shared that story primarily because I think it's not just about trying to prove to others that people of color are people of value, because I think that most people of color need to understand that themselves. But I think what's really more important is that we need to act in ways that demonstrate our value. And that actually is where I'd like to start the conversation. How you deal with a Nazi, and this particular person, had certain beliefs which are aligned to the Nazi movement, neo-Nazi movement. He was of German descent. He was a person who had very strong opinions about separation of the races and the enlightened, evolved white male. So these were very similar beliefs that we see yet again, and that was umpteen years ago. So this is now coming back as a central core political issue that we have to face in 2017 in a, quote, post-racial society post-Barack Hussein Obama as our first African-American president. Now, my question to the panel, either one of you guys can chime in. Mustang, you usually fire off first because I know you're chomping at the bit. How do you approach the topic of we have freaking Nazis running around now on our streets? I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Was that a slip up? Okay. We have the Nazi brigade armed in our southern states marching down our streets now in the name of free speech. We've got Nazis here. I mean, oh my gosh, in 2017, we've got Nazis marching down the streets of the land of the free and the home of the brave.
Yeah. Here's the thing. I feel like, and again, I love talking to us. When I say us, I mean those who are opposed to that, the KKK, the Nazis, the white nationalists. I like talking to us because it's kind of like talking to my own children. The Nazis and let's just use the word the bad people or the people that are doing bad things. They're actually they're a constant. They're a constant. We are actually the variable. Okay, they're a constant. They're going to be doing what they're supposed to do. They're bad stuff. They're doing the bad stuff. Okay, we are the ones who can alter that or not, intensify it or alter it. My children are my children. Okay, if a kid, little Sally, comes in and she's breaking stuff in my house or tripping up and all that stuff, Sally, she's not supposed to do what I ask her to do. She's not mine. She doesn't belong to me. Okay, so all that to say, granted, I mean, she's going to have to get out. She's going to be in trouble. I'm going to go tell her mom, whatever the case is. But she's not mine. She doesn't belong to me. So I feel like and that's why I want to address us who fight against it, because we stand together. We keep trying to put out fire with fire. And no one seems to think about water. It's so hard to think about water when there's a fire for some reason, when it pertains to, a situation like this. We always want to bring out the fire. And what people really don't understand, and this is the critical part, people do not understand. We don't understand. I'm going to say me, because I've been in the same situation. Every time that we react to a situation, especially when that situation is not in our favor, we are on a stage. Everyone is looking at what we'll do next. What are you going to do next?
Absolutely.
Everyone is waiting for your response, and they're going to lock it away, and they're going to label it Chris's character, or Jessica's character, Bob's character, Sally's character. And they will either accept it and actually borrow that ideology and actually use it with them in their future decision making, or they'll abandon it. But regardless of what they do with your display, you will have made an impact on them vis-a-vis the world.
Yeah.
Now,